following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to The People's View, a program dedicated to discussing local, state, and national issues and their effect on the American people. The People's View provides a platform for state representatives and national figures to present their viewpoint. Whether it's social, economic, or financial topics, you'll hear it on The People's View.
Hello, I'm Carl Seidel, and this is The People's View. The People's View is sponsored by the Nashua City Republican Committee, and you can go to their website at nashuagop.org to find out more about the organization. And tonight we have as a special guest our co-host, Peter Silva, who was a representative before, and he's going to try it again. Pete?
Yeah, I guess you never know what happens, like they say, Carl. Life's full of many twists and turns, and here we have another special election where someone resigned and happens to be, of all places, in my ward. So here I am, back at it again.
Well, good, good. And what are you going to do now that you're planning on getting elected? You got to do a campaign when nobody else is doing a campaign, and
yeah, it's kind of weird how this one works for the folks out there that don't know. Is there's a special election that's going to be held, and now it'll be held on the general town election, which is in November. I think it's November 6th. I'm not positive on the date, but it's the first Tuesday of November. And there's a primary on September 17th. So what would have happened was, well, as of right now, today as we speak, I'm the only Republican candidate, but there are 2 Democrat candidates. So that automatically forces a primary. So we will have a primary on September 17th, and then that'll be carried on to the general election in November. If there wasn't a primary, then we would have had the election actually on the 17th, and it would have been over with and done, and could have went on to the regular election. But now there is, so that's how it's going to work.
so you'll get elected in November, and you'll have at least one year. It's a 1-year term.
The last half of the term, yep. I don't think I'll even get sworn in until January if I'm elected, and there's still time to do things. Of course, as the thing progresses, I'll try to get some, legislation put together, get on some of it before then.
Do you have the same kind of format, I mean, the timetable that you usually do, where the second session of the biennial, where you have to turn in your thing before the end of the year, your proposal?
I think it's before November 1st. I'm not positive.
It's November 1st?
I think so. I'm not positive of that.
Okay.
But I know there's still some time to do something.
Okay.
Hop on a few things. And then probably won't be involved in anything that we could have the rules suspended to do something, because we're not in charge anymore. So I don't think they'll be that kind to me.
Well, let's hope that you get in there again, because you were good. You were a majority leader, which was a real, for a second term, it was a real feather in your hat.
Kind of a weird way to get there, but things
well,
happen,
you got there,
so.
Pete. You got a star in your head.
Yeah.
So what do you want to do? What's your main objective when you're being up there?
A couple of things I want to address, and I was going to address if I got back in there. One of them that really I still struggle with is the part I love about our system is the part I really don't like about our system. The part I love is that we're volunteers, but because of that, you don't always get maybe people who can do everything that you need to do to pay attention to some of these things that go on. A lot of them are there just because it gives them something to do, and I don't really agree with that, because you can get taken advantage of by groups, special interest groups. And in the State House right now, one of the things that concerns me are these public union people that are up there voting on the budget, voting on things that would pertain to their pensions, and I just don't think that's right. I don't think that they should not be able to hold office. I just think that once they're in there,
they should recuse themselves.
They have to. I mean, we fill out all these things for conflict of interest, and I mean, if a guy like Will Infantine can't vote when an insurance thing comes up because he sells insurance. How can you possibly think it's okay for a fireman to vote on pensions? It just doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm not sure the count this time, but I believe last term there were 67. So that's almost a quarter of the people in the State House.
They were in the public service pension?
Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, whether it's a spouse or it's yourself, you shouldn't be able to vote on that. Vote on everything else. God love you. They go up there, and some of them are friends of mine. And I've gone through this with them before. I mean, I haven't risked my life as a fireman or as a policeman, or in some cases as a teacher. I mean, let's be honest about it. And I respect what they do. The bottom line is, what people need to make clear is, somebody's got to pay this bill. Look what's happened in Detroit. I mean, that's not far from anybody else's. They just have a bigger number. We all know our number here is like approaching $6 billion of unfunded pensions. I mean, how do you deal with that? So we need to make some type of change on it, and you can't make, in my opinion, you can't make a really honest, uninfluenced change if you're one of the ones receiving it. I mean, I wouldn't vote against my pension. So it's things that need to be looked at. And
you think, in general, the public is ready for that? They're ready to support that because they seem to feel that, these are things that have been guaranteed to the people, and now you're taking something away. That's the approach. That's the interpretation they have to it. I don't agree with that interpretation.
And that's what it is. It's an interpretation because one side gets to tell the story. Someone like me tells a story, they skew it. I think that it's not so much. I think what you need to try to do first, and as best as we can do that, is you need to try to protect the people who were already in there. They made a deal.
Right.
And we should try to do as best we can to keep the deal. Going forward, I think that we have to make changes, obviously, as new people come in, which we did back in our term.
Yeah.
But I don't know that they're enough. And so I go back to just common sense. I've been saying this since before the thing happened in Detroit. Where the change will happen is when somebody goes to cash their check and it bounces. Do we wait till that point happens, or do we try to address it now? And I think if people use common sense and they apply it back to their everyday life, it's the same thing. You can have your charge card if you want it. But all of a sudden you reach the limit and they say, we want that money, and you don't have it, they take things from you. It's just, I mean, if we just apply our everyday life to politics and to government, it makes sense. But unfortunately, the mainstream media, most of the newspapers, they don't like to touch the prickly things and just say, it's not comfortable. And if you're going to do what we do, as you did as volunteers essentially for the $100 a year, I'm not in it to like anything else other than try to make some type of change that's going to, hopefully my kids will stay in New Hampshire. 2 of them have already left, both with intentions of coming back, but just because of jobs. New Hampshire's a great place.
It is. I agree with you there. When we were up there, one thing that always bothered me is when they started talking about refining it, they did talk about people that were in it would not suffer any loss, but the new people that were being hired were going to have to start a different program. What killed that part of it?
I think from the best that I saw of things that took place, it's the classic camel's nose under the tent. The higher-ups in the different unions got everybody all worked into a frenzy to make them think that was just how it was going to start, and it would keep snowballing and go down. And that's really what it goes back to, even the parental notification things that we're involved with. The Planned Parenthoods want nothing to do with anything, any type of legislation. And quite honestly, on our side, with the NRA, it's the same thing like that. When you start to get into different types of gun laws, then people just don't want to stop at anything. And I think it's that mentality, is that once you open the door, then...
That could be, because I heard from some people who are retired who were afraid that they were going to be affected, too.
They scared them all.
The only way they're going to be affected is if they go bankrupt. If the system goes bankrupt, then they'll be affected. So they ought to think about changing it now.
And again, people that you talked to when you were in there, how many of them really know? If you said to people when you campaigned, and I know I did when I campaigned, when I throw out this $6 billion figure, first of all, I think half of them think that you're not telling the truth, because how can that possibly be? When there's only not even 1.5 million people in the state. You know, when you show those or talk about those startling numbers that for every breathing soul in the state of New Hampshire, that includes infants to, you know, 100-year-old people, they're going to owe around $9,000 a year just to pay this unfunded pension beast that we have. Numbers like that start to get to the point where, how can that be? You know, it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense to me, actually. But I think that's probably what it is. No one talks about it. When they do talk about it, it's on like a close-up on Sunday morning. It's not on the 6 o'clock news. It's not on the front of the Telegraph. It's not on the front of the Union Leader. At least not enough for it to sink in.
But this sounds like it's a topic for the second year, the 2014 session.
Yeah, I mean, it's the likelihood of it going through this time to get something done is probably not that good, but you can set the stage. And I think if we start to talk about these things, and people like me get my big mouth out there, and if I think what's going to happen happens in 2014, and we take back over again, when people realize what happened, I think it'll be a good way to start.
Well, our budget that we passed seemed to work out fairly well in time.
Yeah, but you don't hear it advertised like that, do you?
No.
But again, you know, even with the Democrats, eventually, there's nothing left to give.
Well, they realized that this year in this budget, because they gave up on a lot of things that they thought they were going to be able to sell to the people. To the, you know, the budget came up only 3%, which is something that I think we would have done too back when we did have the majority. But what other things are you thinking about while you're going up there besides that?
Well, one thing is for sure, to make sure that voter ID doesn't get messed with. As a matter of fact, just this morning I saw on Channel 9 they did a survey, and it was 67% of the New Hampshire citizens want a form of voter ID.
Good.
Of those, they made it clear it wasn't just a bipartisan survey. It was a bipartisan survey, and I believe it was 28% of Democrats that they polled wanted a form of voter ID or the voter ID system that's in place. And the reason why that's significant is you remember yourself when we were up there, and of course we had a Democratic governor, and he vetoed voter ID. So we had to override the veto. And for the folks who don't remember how that works is, you know, when the governor vetoes something, then you have to have the majority override him.
Supermajority.
In order to do this. So when we had the vote, if you remember, there was not a single Democrat that voted to override the veto. So it goes back to just simple, I don't know, I want to say morality as far as being a politician, if that's not an oxymoron. The point is, you're supposed to be there to represent your constituents. We are in the most represented state in the country, and as far as that goes, the most representative body in the world, actually, the way you look at it, per capita. So if you have 28% of your constituents as a Democrat, that means that you're not representing them if not one of them last time, not one, said, yes, we need voter ID. And it goes back to the hard reality of it all. As I love to say all the time, if I had a magic wand and I could, for an election, change all the minorities and all the union workers to be Republicans in the 90th percentile like they are Democrats right now, I bet you the Democrats would be the first ones screaming for voter ID. And that's just the irony of it all. And when people hear the hogwash of how it's because, you know, everyone needs an opportunity to vote and you're going to discourage voting, and that's crazy. And when you talk about the schools, my kids both went to UNH. They sent in absentee ballots.
Sure.
That's how you do it. It's just that simple. My kid should not be voting in a Durham election, for example, if they're at UNH. The kids up at Dartmouth should not be, if you're from Michigan, you shouldn't be electing the treasurer like they did up there a couple years ago, which turned into a mess. It doesn't even make any sense. you should certainly be able to vote in all of your town elections back home and for President of the United States and all the things you're entitled to. It's called an absentee ballot. Get one. It's that simple.
It's very easy to do.
I don't know
Very
how
easy
you
to
argue it, but they find a way. They find a way because Democrats are not accountable to the media. It's just that simple. How you could have this guy, Weiner, running around. If that was a Republican, not only would he not be able to run, he'd be in jail. The guy, Fowler, I think his name is, out in San Diego.
Yeah.
Just the chutzpah of these people. Where's the shame? Where's the pride?
There
Say,
isn't
you know
any.
what? I got caught. I did a very bad thing. I'm going to make it up to my family. I'm going to go away.
It's
Oh,
personal. It shouldn't bother you in
Yeah,
politics,
yeah.
but that's part of your character.
Of course it is. How do you trust them with the largest city in America?
Right.
If that's your character,
Mm-hmm.
and the guy's still hanging around. It's bizarre to me. And that's part of the reason why, I was lamenting when this thing came about, which I didn't really see it coming. I figured I was done. And, thinking about the whole thing, and then we can't just go away either. That's what they want. So, the stars were aligned. I'm going to give it a run.
Good. Well, I
Just to,
think that's a good objective, and then you have a couple of good plans. There's a couple of projects that you'd like to work on. Is there anything else that you're? I mean, well, let's stay on this voter ID thing. What bothered me the most is that 15% of our election, of the people who voted in the last election, were registered the last day, and of those, they haven't checked on any of those that registered. They did a sampling, as I understand it. A number of people had their letters returned, no longer at that address. This happened, 2 or 3 months after the
You
election?
get senators that had people voting out of their
Well,
homes.
that's another thing, too.
State
There are
rep in
people
this
there.
city
Yeah.
had 3 of them living at her house.
And I think we found other people, too, and it's all going to come out, I hope. But nobody in the press is really doing anything. The only thing that they've done so far is take this poll that you said about voter ID. But that isn't really looking, why isn't the Attorney General following up on some of this stuff?
Well, unfortunately, as I learned, if you're not in the inside, you're on the outside. And it's amazing how quick the phones go dead, and you find out there's no more invites that goes to this or to that when you're not in there anymore. That's part of the reason why, if you want to do something, you got to be involved in it. And for people out there, I tell you the same thing. It shouldn't. To me, I'm pretty sure I told you this. I had a plan from the beginning. I was going to do 3 terms because we have 2-year terms, and I got sidetracked in the last one. It'd be kind of ironic if this works out, because that'll fulfill it. So it'll be 5 years instead of 6. But everyone needs to take their turn. That's how this was built. If you do the New Hampshire way, the way
That's
it was, I always use this analogy. You and I were neighbors. I was just spent last week in an Amish country, and they still do a bit of that.
Oh,
You go to Concord, Carl, and I'll
Yeah.
watch the farm for
Right.
you when you're up there. And 2 years from now, I'll run, and then I'll go. That's why they had so many, because they didn't want to make it difficult to be elected, where you had to use money and everything else. It was more a volunteer system. That's, again, the beauty of it. We need to get back to that. So what's happened, unfortunately, because of our friends on the left with taxes and all these different welfare programs and entitlements and everything else that we have, both people are working now. Guys like me had to go back to work. I couldn't have done this probably from the beginning anyways. It would have been very difficult with my new job, as we discussed.
right.
That's where other people need to get involved. So if I get back in, now I'll have an inside track, and I'm going to go after. I've heard so many different stories now, because we from the city committee level have been trying to do, and we just get, the strong arm. So I would love to get back in. I remember when I was up there before, whatever information I want, they got to give it to me. It doesn't matter. They can't play partisan games, and I know who to talk to. So when I go up there, that is my focus.
That is your first. You're right. Your first term, you're just spending time learning where the information is.
Yeah. It's, again, there's 400 people. In fairness to the people in Concord, they don't have staff for 400 people. This isn't Massachusetts, where you have aides and pages and everything else. You have I don't even know the number, like something like 11 people that are
The lawyers to
legislative
write the
services.
legislation.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of people in the finance section to go find things for you. It takes a little time, but they always get back to you. They're always very professional. I couldn't tell any of them what party they're with, affiliation they have.
I agree with you.
They always treated me fairly, but me, Peter Silva, as a citizen, would not get the same treatment as me, Peter Silva, as the state representative that has, been inside and knows the ropes. It's a whole different animal. So I've heard so many stories now about this past election. 100,000 people that aren't accounted for, and all these different numbers that have been coming around. Most of them are phony. They came in, you hear stories of busloads of this and that. I didn't see that. I live in Nashua, as you know. In Ward 8, we had 1,000 same-day registers. And I used to get the debate all the time, and now I'm starting to second-guess it. They would say, well, if you didn't do same-day registration, then you have, what is it called?
Driver registration.
Yeah.
Voter, what the heck?
Voter
they call it?
driver, or
No.
motor voter.
Motor voter, that's
And
it.
I'm starting to think now that at least is a little bit more cumbersome, if you will. Not as cumbersome to check on as it would be for us to do with the same day stuff. And if you really, I mean, when's the last time you saw on TV that someone got arrested for voter fraud? The only one I know of is that woman in Ohio, and I'm not sure what happened there. But there's not enough of it going on that people are intimidated by it.
And, nationwide, there's a number of different questions that came up, and they sort of vanish, Nobody ever looked for the answers. Why did 100% of the people vote for one person and nothing for the other person?
I forget who said it. I don't think it was Thomas Jefferson, but it's in that era. And I used it in my first campaign. It's not my slogan. I wish it was. We're at the stage now when you have more people riding the cart than pulling the cart. And that was the fear the whole time, and that's where we've gotten to. And all these different things, when they're encouraged to vote because they're going to get phones and they're going to get, these exorbitant EBT system cards and everything else, that's a problem. When you can tell someone, take dignity out of it, because look, we just got done talking about Wiener. There is no dignity. Who cares anymore? That to have some type of self-motivation and pride. If you put that in the closet, and you can, maybe make $1 less an hour sitting home, what are they going to do? That's what we've created.
Well, I've heard, and you've heard of many examples of that happening from some small businesses. They offer a job at, entry level, and it's just not enough to compete with the benefits package that you get from the state. When criticism comes out on some of the people that are living off these benefits, they always come back and say, oh, there's the people that really need it. Yeah, there's a lot of people that really need it, but not everybody needs it, and there's no mechanism to help people get out of the hole.
Well, they have no intention of helping them get out.
That's it.
They want to keep them on there, and then they,
The dependency.
It's almost, if I was to do it over again, maybe I would be like try to become a college professor and study the mind of a liberal, and just to see what's really going on with it, because I honestly believe attached to liberalism is elitism. They go together. And I really believe that they're not bad people. They just think they're smarter than everybody else. So they need to provide for you, because I guess meeting me, they make it seem like I probably can't take care of myself, but I do okay. And I think that that's what it is. They really think that they are smarter than you, so they're going to go ahead and help you because you can't possibly do it. And along the way, we create this behemoth that's not sustainable anymore.
And it's just the opposite of what the country was built on.
Just the opposite.
The country's built on, a lot of self-initiative. Healthcare, you get into that. And one provider, no choices, that's not competitive. That's no way of running an organization.
It's starting to come out now. When I was trying to talk to people about this before, and now they're starting to see a little bit of it. Again, it's my profession. I've been in medical sales. I'm not a doctor, but I've been in medical sales for my whole professional career, the last 25 years plus. And I said to everyone before, we definitely need to reform healthcare. But the two biggest things, and hopefully the people out here will listen to this, that you need in healthcare reform aren't in the plan. Number one and foremost to me, and that's why I took a big shining to Rick Perry, is tort reform. You need to have a way to reform. For the folks who don't know, as simple as I can make it, I'll give you an example. One of my biggest accounts is Newton Wellesley Hospital when I was a sales rep. This has got to be 15 years ago. I can remember them complaining at the time that the office manager was telling me that the doctors are spending 1 to 2 days a month in deposition. Now, part of the reason is orthopedics, and part of the reason is spine. And everybody knows how easy it is to fake a back injury because you can't prove it. So when you do that, and these guys are spending $200,000 to $300,000 a year in malpractice insurance, what you do with tort reform is you sue whoever you want. You lose, you pay. Right off the bat, you cut it in half. Right off the bat. Now, let's think, why is that not in the health care bill? Let's do a percentage of your politicians, Republicans or Democrats, who are not lawyers. Who are not lawyers. 5%? 95% of them are lawyers. Go right through the list of politicians in the state of New Hampshire. Your governor is a former lawyer. Look at, write down the list of the people who are lawyers and who are not lawyers. And so they're not going to go against each other like we talked about the unions. It's the same thing. The second thing is you have interstate commerce with insurance.
Right.
The analogy I love to give, and I heard this from somebody else, is perfect. Cell phones. When I first started, I needed a cell phone. So we had pagers. If I'm stuck on Route 3 in traffic and they're calling me from an OR and they need something because they dropped it on the floor or whatever and I have to go get it for them or make arrangements, I can't wait to get to a payphone. Well, my cell phone bills were over $1,000 a month when I first started because it was one company, AT&T. All of a sudden, Verizon gets in the game, and Mobile One, and all these other companies. And guess what? If you're spending more than $100 a month now, something's wrong, and that's because there's a data plan and all that.
Yeah.
For just a cell phone, it's $10.
Yeah.
So those two things aren't in the bill. So let's see. What's another big lobby? Insurance companies. So again, in this state of New Hampshire, we have two. If you have two, there's no way they're going to compete. I should be able to buy insurance from California if I want it.
I agree with you there. That's one of the things I thought we might have been able to get through last time. It didn't go anywhere.
And a lot of it's, again, a lot of it's lobbyists, and a lot of it, look, I don't want to mislead people, and to think anyone thinks that they're going to go to Concord, to Washington, to anywhere, and by themselves, they're going to change all these things. If you could change one of the things permanently we talked about, you did really good. It takes a team to do it. So it's going to take more than just myself. It's going to take a lot of people involved with the same ethics and that want to make a difference. And it's going to take mostly the people out there to make sure to hold them accountable.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that the people out there have to get a little bit more active in, asking more questions. And even a simple thing like writing letters to the editor, something to keep on pounding on some of these things. I mean, I don't want to get into the national politics, but it seems like everything that comes up just gets washed away. Oh, that's nothing. These are fake.
I started to think lately, Carl, and I'm going to do this as an experiment. This will be my new science project if I get back in. I almost think that we're not looking at the real root of all this evil. It isn't so much the liberal politicians. It isn't so much the activist groups. It isn't so much the Al Sharptons of the world. It's the media. And that's where I want to start. When I give interviews from now on, I'm going to make sure that I get to say what I want to say, and I kind of know how to do it now. And I'm going to start to call them out and start to go, if one of them won't talk to me, I'll tell them that one won't talk to me. Will you talk to me? And as long as you have a message to deliver, and it's not some radical, crazy thing, the stuff we're talking about is real. And if people haven't seen that yet, if they haven't been paying attention that there's already a decline in full-time jobs, or they're going to part-time because they don't want to pay for this health care thing.
Sure.
It's real. We're not making these things up. It's the media they're the real treasonous people in this country, because you know what? No one else could get away with any of this stuff if they talked about it. If it came on Channel 9 every day, and if it was on the front page of, the Telegraph and the Union Leader, and I have to say with the Telegraph, which is pretty weird, I saw like a pretty decent article from me there today, which never would have happened with the previous owners. So maybe they're off to a good start. But that's it. Just, you and I have talked about this before. When I was a kid, my parents would watch Walter Cronkite, Huntley and Brinkley. These guys were all wicked liberals, as I found out later. I didn't know that. I didn't know what it meant anyway. But I never knew them telling the news. Who knew?
Yeah.
They just told the news.
Right.
They came out and said the news. You had these people on MSNBC, and really, as far as I'm concerned, Brian Williams and Diane Sawyer and all the rest of them, they're all complicit in this one big socialist media plot to just take over the country. And they're doing a good job of it. And if I'd rather see right now the Republican Party, to be perfectly honest, rather than spending money on, candidates and everything else, buy another network. Buy out NBC or buy out ABC or one of them.
So that you have the
just
same.
more than Fox.
Yeah.
Put another one on there. So when they say, oh, it's Fox News, now they're going to say, oh, it's Fox News and it's ABC. Then eventually it's going to be, it's Fox News, it's ABC and NBC. And then we can get it back to just telling the truth.
And asking the questions. Don't let them cover the, by saying, oh, that's not worth talking
this Zimmerman thing.
Yeah.
I've been doing this as my little experiment. The day after the trial, or the verdict, or maybe 2 days later, I don't remember exactly, because I think the verdict came out on a Friday, I think. So it might have been like Monday or Tuesday. I'm listening to a talk show, I think it was Cooner at 680 in Boston. And he's reading transcripts of the trial. So I've been asking people this question. I'd say to them, so give me your best description of what happened exactly, like what led up to this kid getting shot. Invariably, myself included, the explanation was very simple. The guy saw this kid in a hoodie, and he called the cops. He called 911. They said, what does he look like? This is the first thing, if you remember, this was on TV.
Oh, yeah,
NBC
definitely.
cut the tape, and they said, could you tell what he looked like? He looks like he's black. What they cut out was, they said, is he Asian? Is he white? Is he black? He said, he looks like he's black. Completely different, taken out of context. But this is the one that got me. So I would have said, he got out of the car, and they said, okay, go back to your car and wait there. So I thought, I was led to believe he didn't listen. He kept following the kid, and the kid turned around and went after him. That's not what happened at all. They read the transcripts. He was going back to his car, and the kid chased him down. Is when he told the other woman there that, I'm going to go see what this crazy cracker wants, or whatever he said. Those are important facts of the case that were never brought out. Everyone was led to believe, including myself, that this guy really was a little bit overzealous. Now, do I think that someone should have got shot that night? No, I don't. And I think that if you're doing these, some of these guys can be yahoos with this neighborhood watch type of thing, but that's the law there. And then if you're gonna be someone that's gonna go after somebody like that, you need to know that there's a potential that guy does have a gun, because that's the law in the state. As that they say, ignorance is no excuse of the law. So these are the things that need to be brought out. These are the things that when they start to embellish and change things, and for Obama to be saying right now that these are,
certainly.
What do they call them? Exaggerated, not exaggerated. These he has a name for it where he's trying to say they're making up all like Benghazi, and I'll think of it in a second. But to be able to say stuff like that, and I said to my wife the other day, can you imagine if one of those kids were our kids that either got killed in a helicopter, which seemed to be really bizarre now, even more so in Navy SEAL Team 6.
That's right. And they're not even explaining it. They're not even, all these things that we're having an investigation. Well, how long is the investigation supposed to go on? What kind of results are you getting,
Yeah, what did he call them? Made up, whatever.
Yeah.
But see, again, But that goes back to my initial statement. It's not Obama's fault. It's the media. If the media was doing their job, he couldn't get away with that. If the media did their job in our state, they couldn't get away with a lot of stuff that they do here either. And that's the whole point. Starts with them. They have an obligation, in my opinion, and I think any sensible person's opinion, not to lean one way or the other, just tell the truth. What a novel idea. Just tell
Well,
the
you
truth.
know, we'll try to make this media maybe a little bit of that. And you'll be coming back a number of times, I assume, to,
I hope to.
be able to explain what's happening up there. And maybe our audience will get out there and make some noise and perhaps bring out more people who will volunteer to be elected. We're having, you know, people ought to be thinking about that now. Are you retired? Are you ready to do something to help out the rest of the people, to have a state that's the way you'd like to see it, or maybe the way you grew up in this state, rather than one that's could be going broke if they keep on spending the way they're spending.
And I think, especially, you know, that the way that our system is geared, unfortunately, it does lean more toward retired people having the burden of doing this. And, you know, even though they're probably done with schooling and stuff like that, their grandkids aren't.
That's right.
And they need to be aware of what's going on up there. And unfortunately, you can't be a part-time Sally. If you're going to do it,
You got
to do it.
whole heart.
And usually the people who have the time to do that are the people who are retired. That's why I said, you know, it's going to work out for me because it's the second half of the term. And if I get back in, it's not going to be as demanding. But I couldn't probably have done a full 2 years, especially in the first year. And being in the minority, we know how that works. So if you're in the minority, you don't necessarily get as much done as you would in the majority. So I think it's a stage-setting thing. And it's not going to be easy this time. So everyone out there in Ward 8 that's listening, I definitely need your support because there will be unions involved. There will be one of the people that's running is a former school board member, so I'm sure she'll have teachers union support. I don't know about the other guy that from the Democratic side, but
Well, how do people get in contact with you?
best way to get in touch with me right now would be through my email, which is P as my first initial, Silva, my last name, the number 372. Significance of that was my first seat in the House, and you were 371. And that's at AOL.com. So psilva372 at AOL.com.
Yeah.
And we'll probably be having, I have a website actually that needs updating, so I won't really give that out until I fix that, but we'll have a website.
Okay, and there'll be the information at the end of this interview with, so people can copy that down so that they know how to get a hold of you and maybe perhaps even make some donations. That's another thing. For $100 doesn't even cover what paperwork you have to have just about.
Yeah, I'm not sure if people realize that, but it really is amazing what we have to spend to do it. And I spent a ton of money the first time, not as much the next two, because I learned more. Because I didn't know, like you, I didn't know anything. Went to those classes together. That's the part I don't like about it. But if you don't have literature and you don't have a way to get out there and meet people, you know, state reps don't, I don't think ever have TV ads or anything like that.
No,
but,
no, but the literature's expensive enough.
Oh,
I mean,
it's postage.
Most people spend at least a couple $1,000s on the mailing and everything else, and that's you know, other people can put ads in papers and go to several mailings and cost a lot more, but you don't really have to do that. What I think you have to do though is get out and meet the people and find out who's out there, try to get them, find out the ones that think the same, and maybe they'll help you. Maybe they'll go talk to their neighbors. I think that's what we have to do, is really stir up the feelings of the people here. Let them understand what they have to do to get people elected that are going to think the same way they do.
There's no question. And I think they probably learned a lesson this last time. I can't tell you the amount of people that I've run into, which isn't necessarily a great thing what I'm about to say, but that had no clue I wasn't still in there. They'll ask me, how's it going up in Concord?
Oh, I still get that question, yeah.
And that shows they're not paying attention, first of all. I even had one person say to me, that was from a different ward, I voted for you. And so, unless they wrote my name in, they didn't vote for me last time. But, you know, we talked about it earlier. That was a big part with this whole thing. It wasn't, I think you did as well. I know that I had more votes in my ward than I had in my past 2 elections, and I still lost. And it was just the D right down the line.
Yeah.
And the Obama people did a good job. I'm not even sure. I wish I had a percentage that I had a gut feeling of, but I would say the majority of the same-day registrars that voted in my ward were all legitimate. They just didn't have interest until they were approached through being
That's right.
deluged with social media, with mailings, with door knockings, with everything.
And phone calls that
Phone
got them
calls.
out. I mean, we looked at the registrations in my ward, and probably the same in all the wards. And you can see you can register as a Republican, a Democrat, or undeclared. The vast, I mean, over 50% were Democrats that voted.
Oh, yeah.
That registered the last day. And I guess we just got caught napping. I think we have to do a little better organizing, and I hope people out there perhaps even come down to the Republican meeting, which is the second Thursday of every month, or to our stakeout on the 16th of August. We're going to have Alan West, the senator from Florida, as a guest speaker. But you can find out more about where we're going, I think, by coming out to our meetings and find out and work together and get the right people elected. Because, you know, other than some of the Democrats that have been running in there, I haven't seen much of any Nashua representative in the paper that they're active in doing very much.
Yeah, in fairness, though, I don't think they get much of a chance. You know, when it's almost a mirror image of when we got in. We had 2 more Republicans in the city than they do now. But it was almost the same number statewide, as off by a couple. I think there was 176 of us when you and I got in, and I think there's 178 now, or 79,
Something like that.
Something like that. So it's very similar in difference of Republicans and Democrats. But, you know, again, I think that what people can also do too is, you know, you've got a brand new ownership at the Nashua Telegraph. Call the Nashua Telegraph and demand that they, when you see a story that if you don't think it's fair, demand that they show another opinion. Demand that they give other sides of stories. I'm really on this kick now because it's one of those, like a light bulb moment that, you know, we've been trying this. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expect a different result. What do? Every election we do the same thing. Mitt Romney was no different than John McCain, who was no different than Bob Dole, who was no different than probably George Bush. George Bush they just had enough of Clinton, just like the Jimmy Carter situation. So it was enough that I thought, you know, Obama was going to do the same thing, but Obama has the race card, and he's playing it beautifully, and that's what got him the second election. You know, if any of us say anything about Obama, we're racist. And that's the other thing that I'm going to really not shy away from. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of Jesse Jackson. I'm sick of Al Sharpton. I'm sick of all these situations where they're trying to. Last I checked, the President of the United States is, well, he claims he's black. As far as I'm concerned, he's half and half. He has a white mother, which you never hear about because it's not convenient. But I think that kind of takes care of the race issue. The guy's president, elected twice. He couldn't do it with only 10% of the population is black. So something's weird there. He's in. And a lot of white people voted for him. So I'm tired of that. I don't want to hear that anymore. I'm done with it. I had nothing to do with it. No one that's on this earth's parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, or great-great-grandparents had anything to do with slavery. So I'm sick of it. And I'm not going to shy away from it. You should be judged as the most famous black person as far as, you know, going through rights and everything is, of course, Martin Luther King. Judge a person by his character, not the color of his skin. And they use that only when it's convenient. And I'm sick of it. And a guy like Alan West, he'll say that stronger than me at that thing in the 16th.
Well, that other person that's making headlines, too, is that a neurosurgeon from Johns Hopkins.
Yeah, he's great.
He
Carson.
He is very good.
Yeah.
And he doesn't shy away from it, saying it right in front of the president, too.
Yeah, you just, it's, again, I go back to the media. If the media was doing their job, if you say things the right way and you don't do them, you know, in a mean-spirited way, just tell the truth. Sometimes the truth does hurt, but if it's the truth, it's the truth. You can't change it because of a person's skin color. That doesn't make any sense to me. You shouldn't get a free ride, and that's what it's become. He can say whatever he wants to say, you know, and he gets away with it because everyone's scared to death of being, labeled as a racist. I say bring it on.
Well, Pete, good luck in your coming election, and we'll have you back on. I know you're going to be elected.
No.
But
I'm not
anyway,
telling you, I never thought I wouldn't be elected last time.
yeah, well, I think there was a number of us who were very much surprised. I hope that when the 2014 election comes, we're a little bit better organized, and I hope people out there see that they can help out by volunteering. People who are thinking that this state, this country needs a change, ought to be out there pushing the candidate that they think best will get that change. And thank you again for the time.
Thank you, Carl.
Okay. And thank you for listening in. And don't forget, go to NashuaGOP.org to find out more about the Nashua Republican City Committee. And do tune in and tell your neighbors about the show, The People's View. Thank you. Good night.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.